guys, and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here, hi, my name is Bongi and you're watching True Crime with Bongi. On today's video, we're going to be talking about one of South Africa's worst serial killers who goes by the name of Jimmy Maketta, but was commonly known as the Jesus Killer. But before I get into it, you guys already know that I have to make my usual disclaimer that I mean absolutely no disrespect to anybody that I'm going to be talking about in this video and all the families that were and are affected by this case. This video is purely for educational purposes and all the information was gotten off the internet and simply compiled into one video. And now let's get right into it. Jimmy Maketta was born in 1964 or 1965. No exact date was given, but we're just gonna go with either one of the 2 years. And his childhood was pretty rough. He was one of 15 children and he came from a really poor family. And apart from his family being poor, they were also very dysfunctional and abusive. And I guess you could say that that kind of rubbed off on Jimmy, because even as a child he was a pretty violent kid and he was involved in some violent activities. He would fight with other kids, he would set things alight, and he also took part in some acts of bestiality. And for those of y'all who don't know what that is basically when a person performs a sexual act with an animal. Weird. So when Jimmy was 16, he had had enough of the abuse and I guess his family in general, and that's when he decided to run away from home. He started living in the bushes, and that's around the same time that he started doing some petty crimes, but he gradually moves towards doing more serious crimes. He didn't just stick to the petty crimes. And I don't know how old he was, but at some point he did move in with his sister in Mitchell's Plain, but he didn't stay for long. Soon after moving in with his sister, he decided that he was done and just moved out. He went back to his hometown in Grebo, and that's where Jimmy Maketta would spend most of his life. While he was living in Grebo, Jimmy met a woman called Janetta and the two fell in love. In the 1980s, they decided to get married. However, Jimmy's behavior changed as soon as they got married. He became quite abusive towards Janetta and their 3 children, but he was mainly abusive towards Janetta. There were 2 instances that Janetta remembered pretty clearly, and one of those instances was when Jimmy stabbed her in the head. The other was when Jimmy beat her up using the branch of a tree and even went as far as breaking her leg. He was pretty abusive, but because Janetta loved him, she decided to stay. However, when Jimmy started having an affair, that was when Janetta decided to leave him and even forbade him from ever coming to their home or seeing their children. So I'm assuming that this was sometime between 2003 and 2005, because Jimmy says that his divorce was the reason why he started killing. However, that's the little that we know about Jimmy Maketta's background. Now we're going to switch locations a little bit and head over to Philippi, which is a small community on the outskirts of Cape Town and is quite close to Grebo. Philippi is also known to be one of the poorest communities in Cape Town. So on the evening of the 2nd of April 2005, a woman called Bonnie Swartz was taking a walk to the shops alone, and when she came around the corner, she saw a man jump out of the bushes already unbuttoning his pants. She was terrified and asked him what it is that he wanted, and that's when the man told her that he was going to have sex with her. He immediately pushed her to the floor and began struggling with her. Bonnie was holding onto her pants, refusing to let go, but he kept on pushing her and firmly pinning her to the ground. At some point, Bonnie managed to free herself from his grip, but she was immediately knocked unconscious with a rock. Once he had knocked her unconscious, he took her clothes off, tied her to a tree, and then her 4 times. Bonnie was in and out of consciousness as the assaults were taking place. Once he was done, he left Bonnie at the scene and then left. Bonnie was found hours later and rushed to the hospital, and luckily she managed to survive. Unfortunately for the small farming community of Philippi though, this was just the beginning of a horrifying era, for in the 9 months that would follow, Jimmy Maketta would terrorize the community, going on to 18 women and kill 16 others. On the same month of April, a woman called Elsie B Jarvis says that she remembers feeling like somebody was watching her as she was walking home one night with her boyfriend and her kids. And when she got home, her mother, who she was living with at the time, was not there. She frantically began searching for her mother, but unfortunately she couldn't find her anywhere. And then on the following month, on Mother's Day, while Elsie's son and some of his friends were playing near a dam, they saw a body floating in the dam. They obviously screamed out for help, and when the people of the community got there, they dragged the body out, and it was confirmed that the deceased was Elsie B Jarvis's mother, Nina Jarvis. She had been and then strangled, and her body also happened to be the third body that had been found in the dam in just the space of weeks. By the end of July 2005, 5 bodies had been found in the dams in Philippines, and these were not just bodies of women but men too, and the man had been hexed to death with an axe. It seemed as though Jimmy Maketta was not only looking for women who were either walking or living alone, but he would also look for couples, and then he would kill the man, rape the woman, and then kill her afterwards. He didn't really have a specific pattern or a modus operandi. He was literally just killing anybody that he wanted to, and he also didn't kill them in the same way. Some had been battered, some had been hacked to death with an axe, some had been mutilated, some had been strangled. He was literally just killing them. The end goal was to kill them. However, he didn't kill all of the women that he raped, and some people believe that he let them go on purpose because he wanted the police to know that this was the work of one person, because the 4 women who survived Jimmy Maketta actually said that they all remembered that he had the word Jesus written on his forehead. They couldn't really remember what he looked like, but all of them could remember that he had Jesus written on his forehead. And it was as if he wanted to show his victims that he was in control of the whole situation and that nobody could help them because he was kind of portraying himself as Jesus. But even though he wanted his victims to identify him, and they did with the word Jesus, the police refused to believe that this was the work of just one person, and they were investigating all the crimes separately. Literally, the murders and the rapes, they were all being investigated separately as separate crimes committed by different people. In August and September of 2005, the Jesus killer went silent. The murders weren't taking place anymore, the rapes weren't taking place anymore, and the people in Philippines had let their guard down. However, in October of 2005, the Jesus killer struck again. Minnie Manuel was one of his first victims once he proceeded with his killing spree. Minnie was asleep in her house with her husband when their door was kicked in. Her husband was dragged outside and Minnie was left inside and continuously raped. When the Jesus killer left, Minnie was afraid to go outside to look for her husband because she felt like the Jesus killer could still be outside watching her or waiting for her to go outside. So she waited until the early hours of the morning to go outside and look for her husband. She found his body together with a neighbor's body near a dam, and they had both been mutilated with an axe. From then on, more bodies were found, and it was evident that the Jesus killer had returned. But again, the police were still denying that this was the work of just one killer, and they were continuing to investigate all the murders and all the rapes separately. By this time, people were starting to think that the police were purposefully dragging their feet because this was happening in a small and poor community of Philippines, and perhaps the police felt like or thought that they wouldn't be held accountable for their poor service delivery. But they were wrong, because the case had actually started getting media attention and people were literally bashing the police. They were also getting accused of being sloppy with the investigation because there was vital evidence that had been left at the scenes, and there were many witnesses and surviving victims who hadn't been interviewed by the police. I guess the fact that the police were also denying that this was the work of just one killer also made Jimmy feel undermined or something, because soon after the case started getting media attention, Jimmy started writing some letters to the police. He wrote multiple letters, and some of these letters also had little maps attached to them. These were maps of where his next victims could be found. But not only was he writing letters to the police, he was also leaving messages for his future victims so that they would know that he would be coming. He spray painted a message on a wall for a woman named Karen, saying that she was a bitch and that she should know that he would definitely be coming for her soon. And indeed, Karen was murdered. After 2 days of the police not discovering Karen's body, Jimmy decided to write a letter describing the ins and outs of the murder, and the letter also had a map attached to it of where the police could find Karen's body. He did not take this letter to the police though. Instead, he decided to leave this letter on Karen's friend's front door. That's the type of killer that Jimmy was. He stalked people, gained intel on them, and taunted them by letting them know that he was watching them. But not only did he watch them, he also watched their friends and family and anybody who was associated with them. And he would also taunt those people by letting them know that he knew that they had some association with his next victim. You know, he was stalking people and just taunting people. He wanted to constantly be in people's minds and scare the community, because he literally knew everybody, but nobody knew who he was. So this time the police finally admitted that there was a serial killer at large, and they began looking for him. In November of 2005, a man called Stanley Martins was arrested in relation to the crimes after the police found him walking alone in the bushes. Stanley had had previous run-ins with the law, and so when the police found him walking alone in the bushes, they were convinced that they had their guy. But they took Stanley's mugshot and they passed it around to the Jesus Killer's surviving victims, and they all said that that was not the man who had violated them. The police also failed to find any evidence that could link Stanley to any of the crimes, and so fortunately 49-year-old Stanley Martins was released. So the news of the Jesus Killer were now getting nationwide coverage, and because of this wrongful arrest, a lot of people lost the bit of confidence that they had in the police. Because of this, the group of police officers that were handling the case were ordered to step down, and a new group led by Captain Morris was assigned the case. Captain Morris would actually go on to do a lot more in just 1 month than what these previous police officers did in an entire 8 months. So Captain Morris came into this case with a strategy. He decided that he was going to revisit all of the crime scenes and also re-interview all of the victims. And in December of 2005, the police would yet again have another breakthrough. But this one would be legit. It had been 9 months since Jimmy had been terrorizing the small community, and he had already murdered 14 people and raped 16 people. So as Captain Morris was revisiting the crime scenes, he found a cell phone that definitely didn't belong to the victim on one of the crime scenes. He decided to unlock the phone and go through the call logs and the contact list, and he actually found one number that had been contacted over 8 times. This number led him to Grebo, and it belonged to a boy named Daryl. Daryl told the police that the phone and number belonged to his father, Jimmy Maketta, who was out on parole for attempted murder at the time. He also gave the police his father's address, but when the police got there, they discovered that he had long moved out. But this didn't discourage the police, and they continued searching for Jimmy Maketta, and they would eventually track him down and arrest him in Mitchell's Plain, where Jimmy had a painting job. Before taking him to the police station in Belleville, Captain Morris instructed him to take the police to his new place, which was actually in the bushes near Philippi. And when they got there, the police seized everything, including the food. They left no stone unturned. They were literally taking everything because everything could have some evidence that could link this man to the crimes. So when they got to the police station in Belleville, Jimmy Maketta denied. He denied having any involvement in any of the crimes. But when Captain Morris told him that he had found his phone at one of the crime scenes and that he had found some evidence at his house, Jimmy finally decided to confess. He wrote a very detailed letter to Captain Morris confessing to the crimes. And some of the crimes that he was actually confessing to, Captain Morris didn't know anything about them. He also drew a little map on the letter, and the map was directing the police to where they could find his final victims. The map also showed his house, his victims' houses, the roads that his victims would take and the roads that he would take, and stuff like that. And he also said that he would stand on top of a hill in Philippi and watch as the farm workers were going home, and that's how he would kind of choose his victims. He also tried to justify this by saying that most of his victims were drunk and most of them didn't even know what was happening to them as it was happening. He further went to say that there was a demon inside of him and it was like a lion or a tiger and it was hungry for blood, and that his victims were like sheep. He also wrote another letter to Captain Morris, but in this letter he was actually confessing to 3 of the murders that took place in Grebo in the late 1990s. He was describing these murders in great detail and in details that only the murderer could know. He also wrote one last letter that was addressed to his ex-wife, Janetta. In the letter, he actually blamed Janetta for all of his crimes and also said that when he had visited her prior to his arrest, he actually wanted to kill her. So Janetta would have been his final victim. Anyways, Jimmy was charged with 18 counts of 16 murders, 6 housebreakings, 2 attempted murders, and 2 assaults. And in court, when he was asked how he would plead, he actually looked quite confused but ended up saying he will plead guilty in order to make things easier on himself. So before sentencing, the court was adjourned for about an hour, and Jimmy actually smiled as he was walking outside, you know, in shackles and handcuffs. And he was smiling regardless of the fact that over 50 of his victims' families were, you know, protesting outside, telling him how he had ruined their lives and how he had taken the lives of their loved ones. He was just smiling. He didn't seem to have any remorse whatsoever. Finally, the court was back in session for Jimmy's sentencing, and the judge said that Jimmy was a psychopath. He showed no remorse and lacked emotional intelligence in general. He lacked the ability to show emotions. He also said that Jimmy had proven to be a very dangerous criminal who couldn't be rehabilitated and would kill again if let out. And so Jimmy Maketta was given the life sentence. So that brings us to the end of today's video. Let me know what it is that you thought or think about this case in the comment section down below. Also, don't forget to drop your case suggestions down below, and if you haven't already, please click on the subscribe button and turn on your post notifications so that you get notified each time I post a new upload. And that's it. I'll see you guys in my next one.